At least the camera's doing it.
It looks live and it is following me around, so I can see live, and this one is also recording.
Alrighty. Everybody, please stand for opening prayer.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the blessings we've received in our community, and we ask that you continue to bless our students, faculty, and staff as they return to the classroom this week. As we meet this evening to conduct business for our school, we pray for wisdom and teamwork to lay successful plans for this school year. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At Northeastern, we are a nurturing family where each night belongs, grows, and contributes.
Are we going to sing a song? I'm in Rotary, and they sing a song after they say that.
Yeah. Hey, listen, if we want to expand out the song.
I'm not saying anything.
It's really weird.
It is.
Chantel Baker,
Present.
Kim Claypool,
Present.
Keith Webster, President Debbie Bartram,
Present.
all are
Are there any members of the community present that would like to make comment to the board? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Hearing none, we're here to just do a little precursor because at the August board meeting, I will ask for permission to advertise the budget. And then before the September meeting, the budget will be advertised as the tax rate. And just a reminder, we always advertise high because the DLGF, the Department of Local Government Finance, always neutralizes our budget and slashes it based on our circuit breaker tax caps and they have to balance our fund within the tax rate. So when you see that initial tax rate, that is not always what we will wind up. In fact, in my time, we've never gotten the initial advertised tax rate. It's always been low. So as we get ready for our budget hearing, we have 4 different funds that pay for the needs of our students that come from different revenue streams. Revenue comes from both state and local taxes. The pension bond, which blessedly will end in December, we'll make our last payment in December. In the 90s, Northeastern Wayne Schools, like many school districts across the state, made a deal with its teachers to fund their retirements. All but one of those teachers have been compensated, but we still owe approximately $117,824 this year in that debt because we're paying back the bondholders. The teachers have all been paid now, but this is our last payment to the bondholders, and then we'll be free and clear of the debt. This is a locally assessed tax that comes from within our boundary. Any questions about the pension bond?
And those were already retired teachers?
The last person who is in service was my first year's principal in the 18-19 school year. That person retired. Everyone else had retired prior to that. And so she is the last one to still be receiving payments, and those stop. There's a actuary table. She'll get payments over a certain period of time and then they'll stop. But our obligation to the bond ceases this year. And I think many of those folks probably have received their entire cash balance because they get the money and they can choose what to do. But I think they can choose to roll it into another financial product. So the debt service fund is similar to the pension debt bond in that we pay back the money from local taxes. So we still owe on the 2009 remodel, into which the cost of the elementary was combined so that the payment covers both the initial cost of the construction of the elementary in the 80s and the 2009 remodel. We also owe on the 2019 bond that paid for the early learning center renovation, the elementary entry and office renovation, and the construction of the building we are meeting in today. We also owe for a common school loan that was taken out. It actually wasn't the last technology refresh. It was the technology refresh that would have occurred in the 18-19 school year. And that was approximately $1.5 million. We have 2 more years on that debt, and then we will be free of it as well. This is all money that comes from the debt service fund and is levied locally. This is all how the local tax rate is impacted. Also under local taxes is the operation fund. The operation fund pays for the salaries of certain employees, transportation, custodial, and my salary has to come out of the operations fund by state statute. We also pay for our utilities, transportation costs, including the bus replacements and fuel and maintenance costs out of this fund. We will be asking for $3.9 million for this fund from local taxes. We're required to ask for this amount due to a 4% growth quotient that is set by the Department of Local Government Finance. We never get that amount. Last year it was closer to 2.1 million. The year before it was closer to 1.8 million. And what happens is this fund is balanced against our debt fund. So the higher our debt fund, the smaller this fund is, which is why we transfer money from education operations. So to remind everyone, it's the next one. The education fund is what our ADM gives us and some other programs. We also get money from the state for our career and technical education classes. We also get money for the number of students who graduate with an honors diploma, be it academic honors or technical honors. In some cases, we'll have one kid who gets us money for both because they'll graduate with both diplomas, which is kind of cool, I think, for them and for us. We get a dollar amount for every Indiana College Core credential that we award. But those amounts all pale in comparison compared to the average daily matriculation, the ADM, which is the student count, on August 1 and February 20th. They changed them this year. It used to always be in September, so we were ready to bargain, and they pushed it back to October 1. So I had a conversation with the union president, and I said, hey, I don't know where our counts are yet, and they pushed the ADM back, but we should know a better sense of it here in a couple weeks. Our contract has an opener. Should we have 10 more students over last year's fall enrollment? Well, right now on paper, it looks like we have 10 more students over last year's fall enrollment, but we also have like 20 high schoolers we haven't seen, 5 middle schoolers, and like 8 elementary student kids. So if none of those kids come back to us, then we're actually down. So we're wrangling. Phone calls are being made. The SRO is being deployed to people's homes to see if anyone live there. And if anyone lives there, it's the same people that have children that live there. So we've started that process. It takes us about a week to get all of that figured out. The other disadvantage we have with starting school so early is that if you start school in a state that doesn't start until after Labor Day, they're not going to do a records request until the week before Labor Day or right after Labor Day because they don't care. They don't start school. So that's also a time frame when you get things showed up. If somebody has moved and changed their phone number, we'll suddenly get a records request around Labor Day. Yep, you moved to Connecticut.
Do we have any on waiting lists?
3rd grade. We've started a waiting list in 3rd grade. And I say that, but I think they got their count down enough that we let them. So I think you'll have some to approve at the August meeting. But we're not exponentially larger, and we're not where we were 2 years ago in terms of ADM. But I don't think we're losing the 3% population that Western Wayne loses every year. So somewhere in between.
Richmond had that too this year? Did they have a big exodus? Like,
Well, so it's interesting, if you look at that news article that was in Western Wayne News, it talks about the 1,000 kids. And when I read that headline, it made my stomach hurt for them. I was like, oh my God, they've lost 1,000 additional kids. And then when I dove down into the article, it's the same 365 that we get and 500 that Centerville gets and the smattering of others that go to Union County and Western Wayne. It wasn't like last year they had that 1,000 kids and they all disappeared over the summer. That is the same loss that they suffer every year for a variety of reasons. But the way the headline read, it looked like an additional 1,000 kids. And I was like, they're going to have to shutter 2 schools and start firing people. Like, I thought it was going to be bedlam there. And when I got into the article, they probably did lose more kids than what they had in the fall of last year. But it's not 1,000. I don't think it's 1,000. 1,000 kids is a lot to lose in one fell swoop.
well, 500 would be a lot for Centerville to take, and 300 would be a lot for us to take. Like,
Yeah.
Somebody, I didn't see the article. Somebody asked me about it. I said, well, I can tell you, we didn't take 300 kids in.
Yeah.
No way.
They did not. Yeah, the only grade level where we're near our cap is 3rd grade. We weren't within 10 of the cap anywhere else. And our kindergarten number was smaller than ours. We have capacity, and we would take students until we hit that cap. So if you know a favorite kindergartner that's shopping around, let us know. So the education fund is driven by our student enrollment on that day. But it's not the kids that are present that day, it's the kids that are matriculated. So if we can show a kid has been in attendance, or if they have transferred in that day. So if they've been in attendance and we have an attendance record, or they transfer in that day, we can count them as ours. So you'll see schools, one of which is a large virtual school and a small physical school. Sometimes they'll be real aggressive about the transfer piece. Like a family will be like, hey, we're thinking about this. And all of a sudden we're getting they've moved their message. And we're like, did you move there or not? And they're like, no, we just called and asked questions. So we don't do that to other institutions, but we've had it done to us. It's fascinating. So education fund pays for teacher salaries and benefits, administrator salaries and benefits, except for me, instructional supplies, and for us includes money that we've historically needed to transfer from the education fund into the operation fund to pay for all of our needs. We transfer the full 15% every year. There are other school districts that only have to transfer 8%. And if you have a large industrial base, you don't transfer anything from your education fund to your operations fund. So it really is based on your assessed valuation. Our assessed valuation is primarily residential housing and agriculture farmland. We have some businesses, the owner of which is in the room with us, but we don't have any light industrial, we don't have any manufacturing. Some of the larger businesses that would generate a lot of the income that you see at the 3% tax cap. So if you get 3% tax off of a $200 million business, that's a lot of money in your operations fund. Well, I hope Hank's Pet Lodge is doing well, but they're not doing $200 million worth of pet lodging at this point. Not that we know of. Not that we've been. So, all of that to say, Our tax rate is typically pretty predictable, but it's also one of the lowest assessed valuations in the state of Indiana because it's all farmland and residential. And that gets us in our operations fund heavily. We don't see the type of relief that other places get. I have reminded Senator Rotz about this setup. There was a bill that did not make it through the legislature last session about a $250 per student operations fund kind of assistance. And anything that they consider doing would be a help to us, a district like us. Now, if you're a district that already has a very healthy operations fund and that's where they're getting the money to help us, I understand why they would be upset about that arrangement because they would be losing funding. So we'll allow the state legislature to do its thing. But if somebody asks you if you're interested in operations fund relief, the answer to that question is yes, please. For Northeastern, it might not make sense for other school districts, but it does make sense for us. And just a reminder, the most expensive thing we have are our people. They're more expensive than the amount of money we spend buying new buses, fixing buildings, even all of the money we're about to put into this bond. Those amounts of money pale in comparison to the amount of money we spend on our people. The revenue for this fund comes from the state of Indiana and is mostly supported by sales tax. There's a little bit of lottery money in there. There's some other taxes that get flowed in there, but most of it is sales tax. They've increased our per pupil amount, which accounts for the increase this year. This fund does not impact the local tax rates, and the increase is projected at 2%. We'll get a 2% increase from the state of Indiana. We've already bargained a 2% raise with our union. If we are up 10 students, then we will have to have a discussion about salary at that point. At this point, I don't know if we'll even have to have that discussion if we're not up 10 actual students over last year. So,
Does every school in Indiana get the same amount per student?
no, there is a complexity index. Everyone gets the same base amount, and then they apply what's known as the complexity index. So our complexity index is influenced by our free and reduced account. So we get a little more money per student than a district who would have a lower percentage of free and reduced account. There are also some community factors that are involved in terms of overall poverty rate within typically a municipality. We don't necessarily get that extra money. And then there are other factors, like if your complexity index is up, you tend to qualify for more federal grants. And we don't meet that threshold either. So we get a little more money than other districts who have less complexity than we do, but not nearly as much as other districts that have significantly more complexity than
So even Richmond would get different than us, and Centerville would be different.
Yes.
Even as close.
our free and reduced rate is higher than Centerville's, and our free and reduced rate is much lower than Western Wayne's. So it really does depend district to district. Good question. So this fund, when we talk about this approximately $10.5 million, it is not something that you tax on, but you do spend on it. When you approve the budget, you're giving the district permission to spend that money on our people and our programming. And a reminder, we don't charge for textbook fees anymore. So that also comes out of this amount. So that'll be, as we move forward, especially when we come back around the bargaining table in a year. Because even if we come around the bargaining table this year, it's not a full bargaining session. The only thing we're talking about is wage, not benefits, not any of the other language in the contract. Just, are we going to consider giving more of a raise? And to remind you guys, we do have a provision in there that if we are down 10 students, I can go back to them and ask for a reduction in the raise that we've already agreed upon. The likelihood of that happening is, I would say less. Even if we are like student 11, trying to claw back money from our employees would be a very difficult stance. I had it in there in case we actually did see an exponential drop in students, because 2 of our neighbors have seen that in a year. They've lost 30, 40, 100 kids out of nowhere. So I leave that in that contract in case we experience something like that, because then we really would have to consider a salary adjustment. But if we're kind of around second base, we make the swipe and it's close, I don't see a reason for us to have to go back to our employees and ask for money back. So we'll see how it shakes out. But I want you to understand why the provision to save us is on one side. And of course, if we had just blow the top off year and we got dozens of students, we would of course want to pass that windfall along to our employees. So that's why it's structured that way.
The state gives us money for the book fees now. Is that just on per kid, or they just added it to that ADM amount?
It's approximate, last year we got approximately 1.5 million, and that was about $150 a kid, so ballpark math. We spent on average, depending on the grade level, anywhere from $200 a kid to $350 a kid. And so that 150 was a nice start, but the rest of it comes out of this fund. So it depends on how sophisticated our offerings are, and it depends on what we already have in place that we need to pay for, that we know works. So it really doesn't cover all of it. And I've had that, the state actually asked for, what do you actually spend at each grade level? And so we provided that data to them so they could see there is a significant delta, a difference between what they gave us and what we spend per student. And we're hoping the legislature will consider that and put more money in that. So we'll see. We hope. Assessed value and tax caps. Our assessed value increased to, $260,006,784 for this last year. The new AB has not been certified yet for our county. This was up almost 9 million from the year before. But just for your comparison, there are plenty of school districts in the state of Indiana that have over $1 billion with a B dollar assessed valuation. We are at 250 million. So it's apples and oranges when some of these larger places are talking about their budgets. We have less kids, so we get more money, but we also have less assessed value. So when we levy a tax, our people feel it differently because we have less people and we have to ask for more money through the tax than you have to have when your AB is $1 billion. So it's different. It's different math in terms of scale, but we did go up, which is nice because it will help float the tax rate a little bit down. And then the amount of money that we lose as a result of the 1% on residential, 2% on agriculture, and 3% on commercial properties tax cap is $244,011.13. And that comes out of the operations fund, which is already our most strapped fund. So that's another reason that we'll see our operations fund be very, very close. When you get the December fund report, it is always within $20,000 of being a zero amount fund in operations. And I don't know if it'll be this year or next year. I may have to come in November and ask you to make a transfer from rainy day to operations so that we don't bingo the fund. It's against state law to have a $0 balance in the operations fund at the end of the year. So, but regardless of that state law, we still have to spend money on gas and keeping the lights on and all those things. So part of the reason you've seen us swirl so much money into rainy day is that if we need a cushion, that's where it lives. That helps us be viable should we have a really cold winter or fuel prices spike, or we have a bus that rusts out and we just have to replace it. So we worked really hard to get out in front of most of those things, but we're still subject to the laws of nature and going in from time to time. So moving forward, our budget process is as follows. At the August 21st regular meeting, I will ask for permission to advertise the budget. In September, I will share the funds as they were advertised, and we will solicit your feedback and public comment following both our public comment rules, but also we're required to have public comment on the budget twice, once at the hearing and once at the adoption meeting. And then in October, you'll vote to adopt the budget as advertised. And we also have to pass a couple resolutions, a resolution to not spend all of the 2025 money. And we pass that because we may not get all of that money. Tax collection rates are very high in Wayne County, and we're very grateful to our population for being good taxpayers, but we do not get 100% of the tax. And if we don't need to spend money, then we won't. So there is a resolution to spend less than we say to get budgeted and appropriated. And then there's also a resolution to transfer the 15% from education operations. And some years it's like 14.5%, and I don't transfer all of it, but most years of late it has been the full 15% to keep the lights on. It's a lot, but it is a good reminder, and I'm glad that we have kind of this quieter opportunity. If you have questions about the budget, things that you want to know about, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Any questions?
Okay. Well, that's really everything that we had in the working. I think we were dealing with some other situations last year. So I think we had a working session, and then we had an executive session where we had to solve some different problems in the executive chambers, if you will. And so far, not this year.
We don't have to approve anything, do we?
No, this is a work session. We don't have any action items tonight.
Are there any board comments?
I do have a question. From what I've heard in the gubernatorial platform, it would be Senator, what's his name?
Ron.
Ron, yeah, thank you. Who did once take the time to visit our school.
He did.
On a tour. Is he proposing a 4% cap on assessment increases? Is that how okay.
He is.
What's the potential net damage to our finances that way?
It's a great question.
Property taxes, yeah, we got a cap on the percentage we pay, but our assessed value seems to kind of be arbitrary sometimes.
Well, and in the operation fund, we have a maximum growth quotient of 4%, regardless of what our assessed valuation does. So even if we had, let's say we had a big pop one year and all of our property went up 10%, we would only be able to collect 4% because that's the max. So we can go up to 4%, We can certainly be less than that if our assessed valuation doesn't go up. So this 4% tax cap doesn't really change anything in the operations fund. But the disconcerting part is it's across all municipalities. So we have a maximum tax cap, but if the library needs something, they also have a debt service fund. You can't limit the debt service fund on debt that's already given, and my fear is that cap may artificially cause that debt service fund to be in jeopardy. I know that our association is working with IASPO, and they're going to work to meet with the gubernatorial candidate, and I would remind you that it is the legislature that sets the budget and not the governor. So he is de facto head of his party. He would have a lot of influence, but it would still be up to our senators and our House of Representatives to set that budget. And we're very fortunate here in Northeastern. We have a good working relationship with both Senator Rotz and Representative Dr. Barrett.
Do you think we're seeing a net decrease in population, school-age population in this area?
We are. The demographers have predicted it. We are starting to see it. I think Richmond is seeing it the fastest. Our realtors are doing a good job of selling our homes in our contiguous boundary, but I think they're starting to see a population decline that will eventually reach us. And we also have a birth rate in Wayne County that's increasingly lower. And so each year we have a low birth rate. 6 years later, we're going to have a small kindergarten class. And as things stand, we're going to share that birth rate kindergarten class across 5 school districts. So I think the demographers believe that we will continue to decrease population unless something changes. And the interesting part about Wayne County right now is there is a lot of proposed change afoot in terms of housing projects, both downtown and out near where we live. And we also have some folks very interested in trying to get housing starts within our contiguous school district border. If those projects come online, our cost of living is competitive with anywhere in the United States. We can get more people to have a place to live here, and we continue to work on some of our amenity areas that could use some improvement. You know, demographers only do a 5 and 10 year projection, so we're inside of that 10-year projection. But we've been creeping toward this 10-year projection. I think the demographers came before I was here at the high school, so you know their projection is only good for another 4 years or so. We make a radical change, and you know we would probably want to do a demography study in conjunction with another 3 or 4 other school districts to keep the price affordable. But if we had a demographer come next year, the year after some of these things are solidified in policy and housing starts have started, who knows what their projections would be. I guess all of that to say is I don't want to be fatalistic about it. I don't know that I believe it's an unchangeable fact, but we are seeing trends in terms of population decline that have been pretty consistent over time, but we've never taken the types of steps that are being proposed to turn that around. So am I optimistic that we get those pieces to come together? The work that Erlen has done to secure grant funding in the county is substantial. The work the commissioners has done, you know, even here locally, we have a Forward Wayne County coalition for the first time. I know that they're they're working on spinning up their goals and those sorts of things. So we have some opportunity to make that change, but empirically, we've seen a decline. And I think it would take some measures for us to mitigate that, but those measures can be taken.
Any board comments? Any employee comments?
I said it, as you all came in, but I want it on the public record that I want to thank you on behalf of the school district for all the support that you had at the beginning of the school year. The 5 of you being at the meeting and being available for people to come up and talk to you and say hi, put a name with the face. As employees who work for a board, I think it's good for them to know who you are and know your name and your face. And if they see it at a basketball game, know that they can come and say, hey, we think this gym looks amazing. They may not come and say that, they may come and say other things, but to know, to know who you are, I think it's a show of support that doesn't always happen. I've worked a lot of places, and I have not seen an entire board at an opening day before. So I appreciate that. So
We appreciate you playing the guitar.
Keep your day job.
I walked in and I was like, what is going, had to take a phone call, and I come in, I'm like, what is going on in here?
Concert.
Yeah, it's a reminder. I've had a lot of, as you might imagine, I've had a lot of people comment on that, mostly positively. But I hope it was an example of, hey, you spend time on yourself, good things happen. So I hope they'll consider it and strive. But I have had people tell me what their views are. Anybody take the VIA survey? I may not send it to you.
I don't, yeah.
Okay.
So I was gonna ask you if you could send it.
I
Yeah,
will,
send it to us.
I will do
Yeah,
that.
no, I want to do it.
I will do that.
All right. Anything? All right, does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Webster, second by Ms. Bartram, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned 5-0.
Sweet.
It's just so loud, it kind of wears the.
The owl is still.
The owl is still alive.
Yeah, we have to make sure it.
Okay.
Creepy eye.